Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme today we'll be asking, do we need a new Tony Blair centralist party in Parliament? So joining me today, I'm joined by a journalist and a politician. I'll first start off with our journalist, who is Charles Gardner, who's a former editor-in-chief of Prophecy Today, worked in Fleet Street and does a lot of articles writing about Israel, and also features on Melanie Simmons' newspaper, the Heart newspaper. So welcome to the programme, together with David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party. But I'll start off with you, David. I know that since you were young, you've been passionate about politics, and it's your Christian faith guides you in your kind of journalism. Just explain to our viewers how important it is to write about what's happening in government and government policies as they relate to our Christian faith.
Yeah, right. I suppose I grew up very much influenced by my mother, who was a political activist in South Africa in the old apartheid days. An anti-apartheid activist, and I took that on as well, and I did some campaigning as a student, and I wanted, like many people do, wanted to put the world to rights, and you know, I was a bit of a university dropout, but after coming over to England to stay with my Jewish gran, in North London for a while, it turned out to be a very long time, actually 50 plus years and counting. You know, I had the opportunity of well, actually, what happened really, I wanted to put the world to rights, but I found Jesus Christ as my saviour while I was staying with my gran 50 years ago last month, and wow. You know, that changed my life, because, you know, I now had met the person who could change the world. And, you know, I had that political inkling, but I really felt the Lord calling me into journalism, but as it happened, I ended up covering a lot of politics, first of all as the South African correspondent Fleet Street correspondent for the South African Press Association. So we spent a lot of time at the Foreign Office and in Parliament, covering debates about what used to be called Rhodesia and all the trouble South Africa were causing over the Soweto riots and the Steve Biko issue. Some people of my era will remember. And so it was exciting and very fulfilling. But of course, as a news agency reporter, we weren't really in a business of offering our opinions so much as just reflecting what the politicians were saying and what the developments were.
This is a big change from today's media and politics. Now, on to our favourite politician, David Curtin. Now I know that you've been busy with lots of campaigning in by-elections, the latest one in Honiton and Tiverton, which the Liberal Democrats run. Just explain how that went for our viewers, and some of the issues that you encountered in the doorsteps in East Devon.
Yeah, time marches on. That's over a week ago now, but when I was in it, it just felt like it was all encompassing. So of course, when there's a campaign going on, you put everything into it. So we had a great candidate standing there in Tiverton and Honiton for the first time, Jordan Donahue Morgan. And yeah, on the doorsteps, I think the big issue was people were just fed up of the main two parties, but especially Boris and all of his shenanigans and the whole Partygate situation, the hypocrisy that goes around that, fuel prices going up, which is completely unnecessary, the cost of living crisis, and there's so much dissatisfaction with the political class, but particularly with the ruling party, as there always is, you know, in mid-term. But this was quite a significant event, I think, because it's the biggest ever swing we've had in a by-election, I think, ever in history. So the Liberal Democrats won. Unfortunately, people elected a party that's just going to do exactly the same thing. But it does mean that people are looking for an alternative alternative. You know, we made a little bit of progress considering that we're new and we don't get a lot of media coverage yet. I think they want to keep us out because if people hear about us, they actually really like what we stand for and we have to say.
Excellent. Thank you for that update, David. And last week, Charles, there was a big conference called the Future for Britain Conference, a plan and to prepare for a new world, led by our former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Now, it has been said that he wanted to use this centralist conference of progressive centralists to come together with the possibility of forming a new centralist political party in Britain. Before we unpack some of the details within this conference, which was really a front for kind of a globalist agenda, do you think Britain needs a new centralist party?
No, I don't really, but because I think that it has the potential to take away from the, you know, we need a bit of the adversarial element in politics, where people are called to account, and you know, when it's like, you know, driving in the middle of the road, you know, or you know, you get church people talking about having a middle of the road sort of a view of biblical authority, and the problem with the middle of the road is you get run over, and I think
that's a good analogy.
We really need to have very clear cases of where we stand. Do we stand for or against the major issues of the day?
And David, we know that generally general elections are won from the centre ground, but we find that governments don't govern from the centre, whether they're Labour or the Conservatives. So the same question to you, really. Do we need a new third party that is a centralist party in British politics, with Tony Blair being the architect or the backseat driver? Because we know that he doesn't have the popularity, despite the fact that he won 3 general elections for the Labour Party, to actually lead this potentially new centralist party.
I don't think we need any centrism in the UK or anywhere else. It's terrible. I mean, you know, the thing is, look at what happened before the last election. There was this new centrist party that was formed called Change UK. No one really remembers this anymore. Yeah. But if you think back, there were some Labour MPs that are considered on the right of the Labour Party and Tory MPs on the left of the Tory Party. Basically, they're all the same, with some of the Liberal Democrats as well. So you had Chuka Umunna, for example, and you had Anna Soubry from the Tories. They got together and they actually surged in the polls for about a week or two, and then they collapsed and they stood and nobody voted for them, and those MPs that changed parties and switched all got voted out. I mean, so that was their fate. And I think if someone tries to make a new centrist party, which is just saying exactly the same as the Liberal Democrats, as what Keir Starmer represents, as what Boris Johnson now represents, as Theresa May and David Cameron before them, and Tony Blair, obviously, he sees himself as the kingpin of the whole centrist movement. I think, you know, people would just be repelled by that. Normal people who actually want, you know, the country to be restored and want a little bit of passion in politics, and to restore, you know, the excitement that we have in our nation. And centrism doesn't do that. Centrism just adheres to all these bland agendas like the climate alarmism agenda and the globalist agenda and the corporate agenda. I mean, there's nothing in that for ordinary people.
That's good. So there you go, Tony Blair, you're doomed now. So you heard it from David himself. And Charles, this new conference, which sounds very interesting, sounds almost like a pretext for a globalist agenda.
It does,
and
yeah.
The Spectator and the New Statesman particularly was very critical. It says here that they wanted to forge a new politics, bring progressive centralists together to discuss the policy challenges of the future regarding climate change and the technological revolution. Now, they're focusing pretty much on the effects of climate change and also using technology essentially to do away with our democracy and to use it more and more. So what are your thoughts on a politics that is based on dealing with climate change, but also using and harnessing new technological advances to solve so many of our problems, not only in our society, but also around the world?
Yeah, I have a problem with the description of politics as progressive. I think that the word has changed its meaning quite considerably. Since I was a youngster, you know, supporting the South African Progressive Party, as it used to be called, you know, progress to us was putting things right and righting wrongs in society, and particularly in South Africa, of course, very black and white issue, literally. You know, that you were either for apartheid or you're against it, you know, and we don't, things aren't as stark as they used to be, and maybe they need to be stark again. You know, we have a clear difference of clear options to follow, you know, as you say, David. Things become too bland, do they not? You know, and I don't think that that's the way forward. We need to be informed by our worldview, and if we follow Christ, and if our worldview is informed by the Bible, then we really need to reflect that. And this is a great opportunity for people to be involved in politics. But I know it's a bit of a tightrope to walk, as some politicians who are Christian politicians have said, but you've got to make your choice at the end of the day, and you've got to stand for what you believe, and that's what people will impress people in the end, when they get the coverage, when some of these parties get the coverage that they deserve, and people will be impressed with people who stand up for what they believe.
Absolutely. David, just want to read out one of the quotes I got here from the New Statesman. It says, Larry Summers, who's a US economist who served both in the Clinton and the Obama administration, said this. He was one of the key speakers at the Future for Britain conference organised by Tony Blair and his think tank. He said there, we in the Progressive Centre never dreamt that something like Brexit could happen, never dreamt that someone like Trump would be president in the United States, never expected the backlash from our middle classes to ideas we thought were fairly self-evident. Isn't this the problem with the kind of centralists, the likes of Tony Blairs and others, that they don't have a clue about what the electorate want? Yes, they probably know how to win elections, and there's no better prime minister that knows how to win elections than Tony Blair. But the fact is they totally misunderstand and misrepresent the general public opinion and the electorate when it comes to key issues such as pushing forward these globalist agendas, and clearly didn't understand why the British people wanted to be out of the EU.
Well, that perfectly represents the hubris of these people. I mean, they are a self-appointed elite. They consider that they're above everybody else who are just sheep, and they can direct them and direct nations into the sort of path that they want to take them. So they're on their way to a sort of corporate-led global government. You might not have that sort of being represented as an actual global government, but the nations will be hollowed out essentially, and they'll just become puppets. So the institutions will still be there, the parliaments will still be there, but they won't have any real power. And that was exactly what the European Union was doing. So we still have our parliaments, but power was going off to Brussels, and then power was going out of Brussels again to corporations, to a corporate level that was above even Brussels, that was trying to run the world on a global level. And people didn't want that. So when we had the opportunity to vote for Brexit, people voted to leave this European Union because we don't want to have our nations dissolved. We don't want to have our culture and our traditions walked all over and corroded and dismantled. And that's exactly the same with Trump coming in with Make America Great Again, America First. People are proud of their nations. They don't want America to be ruled by the United Nations or the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum as well. But these people were just too arrogant that they were so blind they couldn't see it because of their arrogance.
And Charles, one of the guest speakers also included Rory Stewart was there, and David Gorky, ex-Conservative ministers, together with Baroness Davidson, who was the leader of the Conservatives up in Scotland. And the whole idea is that they were suggesting that we follow President Macron's idea of forming a new centralist party to win the elections. Now, I think from what David has said, the prospect of having a new centralist party in British politics wouldn't go down with the electorate at all, without the kind of press coverage and high-profile personalities attached to it. So do you think that this is a non-starter, or do you think that Keir Starmer can win the battle within the Labour Party to try and push the Labour Party more towards the centre and not be hijacked by the Corbynistas within the party?
Well, Sir Keir needs to do that, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it. There's too much momentum with the likes of momentum and the left of the Labour Party, and which also reflects much of the wokery in our society generally. And yes, people deciding what is best for us. But you know, these people who like Tony Blair, who think that they've got the answers to fix the world. It's good to have ambitions, and it's good to realise that the world needs fixing. But it's who's going to fix the world, and I know the only person who can fix the world, and if we put our trust in him.
Amen. I couldn't agree more with you. David, I just want to give a quote, which is an interesting quote. So also at this conference called Future for Britain Conference, there was a Taiwanese businessman who didn't condemn China for its awful abusive human rights record, nor for potentially attacking Taiwan and its threats against Taiwan, but instead said the UK should adopt the Chinese Communist Party's technical authoritarian policies of introducing the social credit system, the incredible totalitarian mass surveillance of its population, encouraging neighbours to spy on each other, and effectively controlling with 500 million spy cameras this entire population, thinking that we should introduce this here in Britain. Now, isn't this an affront to democracy and freedom?
Well, absolutely. And this is what the governments around the West have tried to introduce over the last 2 years. After lockdowns, then after the injections and the coerced injections, there was the digital identity system coming, which would have put in place a social credit system. And actually, in some places in September, they're going to roll out trials of sort of a social credit system in Bergamo in Italy. And I think in France, they're going to bring back the green card system again. They're talking about this. So this is something they've tried before. People rejected it. They don't want it. You know, even in Israel, that was one of the forerunners. The Israeli government tried to bring this green card system and impose that on the citizenry in Israel. But in general, the people didn't want it. There was terrible oppression there. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. People rejected this because we have a tradition of freedom that goes back centuries. Unfortunately, China is under the jackboot of the Chinese Communist Party, and you can see how people suffer there. But I think people here can mostly see that we don't want this kind of system rolled out across the West. But then that comment from that Taiwanese person just shows that's part of the global agenda. They want to change society fundamentally. And if that's their new idea, if that's their progressive idea, I mean, they're going to be roundly defeated at the ballot box unless they can pull a bait and switch, like you were talking about Macron. Just quickly mention there 2017. That was an extraordinary election because Sarkozy had been in power, I think, for 10 years as president, and he was defeated completely.
Sorry, he only served one term in office.
Sorry, for 5 years.
And then it was Hollande.
Hold on, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
But the party, the centre-right party, was roundly defeated by Macron, who came out of nowhere. But he was presented as a populist. And so that was like a bait and switch. He got into power, and then he was this centrist trying to put in place all the globalist agendas. I think that was the only reason why he won. So the only way a centrist party could get into power is if they pretend to be something else, and then do a big bait and switch, a little bit like what Boris Johnson has done in this country.
Yeah, also what's interesting, he's paying the price for that now, isn't he? He may have won a re-election as French president the first time since President, who's the French president, back in 2002.
Was it Mitterrand?
After Mitterrand. Oh. There you go. Our French politics isn't that great. Well, it'll come. President. Macron, anyway, it'll come back to me anyway. Going on from there, he paid a heavy price for that when he was re-elected for a second term. And then he lost the parliamentary elections. That means he's a lame duck president. So we see that these values, or centralist, globalist values, are not going down very well with the electorate. But isn't there a danger, Charles, for example, that there is now out in the open, really, since COVID-19, all these globalist agendas that all point in a direction for global solutions, for global problems, and we're starting to see really the emergence of a one world government emerge?
Yeah, I agree. There is. It's clearly, and it's very alarming. I mean, personally, I don't think Christians should get too worked up about this, because providing we do our duty of warning people that these are happening and these things have been prophesied in the scriptures, this is all coming to pass. Jesus is coming soon. There are good signs of that, and it's a wonderful opportunity of sharing the gospel, which is the one thing that will change and can change the world for the better. I mean, there is a lot of doomsayers about these days, and but you don't hear of some, or there's not much focus on some of the good things that are happening. And it's ironic that in the wake of Trump's defeat, with Biden coming in as president of America, we then have the situation of the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision overturning 50 years of abortion law in America, and which is much of the work of Trump, as far as I can see. And you know, this is the sort of thing we need to see, and it's a great victory, I think, for somebody who really stands up for what he believes and says it, no matter how unpopular it is. And we need a bit more of that, I think, which won't make me popular, I'm sure.
And David, finally my memories come back to me. Jacques Chirac. There we go. So there we go. So I'm sure you at home would have shouting in the scream. It's Jacques Chirac. So going on to also about this conference, Tony Blair actually said the big struggle for the centralist parties, and pointed to the success of Joe Biden in carrying out globalist progressive agendas. But we see there really that his policies and the policies that his government is pursuing are not popular in the United States one little bit, and he's taken probably one of the most robust, strongest economies in the United States and literally driven it into the ground.
Well, it's disastrous. I mean, he's said that, you know, they can't use their own oil and they have to go into renewable fuels, and Trump actually made America self-sufficient in energy. Biden's just destroyed that with all of the lockdown policies. They wanted to lock down hard and fast, close down mom and pop businesses, as they're called in America, small and medium-sized businesses, to allow the biggest corporations to, you know, take up market share. And that's, of course, destroyed Main Street America, you know, what we call the high street over here, just small shops, and that part of the economy. So, yeah, it's absolutely disastrous. Combined to that, I would say, you know, there's obviously questions about the US election with the Dominion and Smartmatic machines, which still haven't gone away. And there's the recent film 2000 Mules which some people might have seen, that actually presents evidence as to how the election may have been stolen. So it's worthwhile still considering that. Is he the legitimate president as well? But that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole new programme in itself.
We can talk about too.
And Charles, how important is it that we pray for our political leaders? Because I know that you're reading Tim Farron's autobiography right now, and of course, as a Christian, he was in a difficult place where he didn't really come forth with his own Christian faith and
Clear enough.
And then paid the ultimate price of having to resign and be hounded out of the position which you would loved, which would be the leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, in the first instance, yes, it is extremely important that we pray for our political leaders. My wife and I do pray for Boris Johnson every day. You know, they have got an enormous lot on their plate. They need God's help. I mean, we pray for the people will experience and find and search for God's wisdom in things, really. Maybe because, you know, secular societies don't do us much good in the long term, and we need people who have a God-shaped policy for our future. As for Tim, well, I'm reading his autobiography at the moment. I haven't quite finished it, so but I sympathise with him greatly. But on the other hand, you know, I think he found out that he absolutely had to. He regretted not coming out very clearly with his faith. Earlier on in his political career. It would have saved him probably quite a lot of heartache. And so my call is to Christians in politics, to make it clear where you stand for from the beginning. I know that might make it a bit difficult for them to campaign in the first place or to be selected as candidates, but, well, what can you do? If you're for the Lord, you're for the Lord, and you know, he's your first line of authority.
Amen. There's one thing I really love about you, David, is that you and your party represent and reflect the same values. So instead of having biblical Christian values and being stuck with a party that has liberal progressive values, and you find yourself completely at odds, you know, you're the genuine article, are you not?
Yes, thank you very much.
David
Hallelujah.
And Charles, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's Politics Today, and I want to thank you for watching at home. I think the prospect of Tony Blair coming back to form a new centralist political party, I think puts a lot of fear and dread in most of our hearts, and also proves that you can't actually govern from the centre. There is no third way in British politics or any other Western politics, but instead what we need is our politicians, our leaders, to have integrity, to be led by the Spirit of God, and to make courageous and righteous decisions on behalf of the nation. So let's continue to pray for them. So let's thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.